Banshee is one of the oldest Warframes, one of the easiest to acquire, and one of the most vulnerable. She has next to no armor, no ability to recover health or shields, no ability for damage reduction. And yet, she is capable of obscene power. If I shoot this enemy here, we see 12,000 damage. Do a bit of setup and it leaps to, -2 billion. Switch to a different enemy, and we jump from 12,000 to no damage number at all. But worry not, we can look into log files to see the real information. Let's see, the total damage dealt was, yes, 228 trillion. Perhaps I should explain. I'm TheKengineer, let's solve a practical problem. Banshee, as a classic Warframe, comes with a simple passive and 4 tapcast abilities. Her passive is that every weapon she wields is silent to enemies. You could be firing the Obliterator 9000, not a single foe will hear it happen. They'll still see corpses, or the fragments of them, should you leave survivors, but by then it's probably too late for them. Her first ability is Sonic Boom, to push back and knock down every enemy that isn't behind you. This ability can push around even acolytes and demolishers, allowing for emergency control of a situation. However, enemies do get back up very quickly, making it difficult to move in for ground finishers much of the time. Augmented, Sonic Boom also removes armor permanently from those affected, with just 143% strength totally removing armor in one cast on its own. Throw in corrosive projection, and the strength demand drops to 118%. But trust me, you don't want to be trying for a low strength on Banshee most days. Her second ability is Sonar, but it's a little more complicated, so we'll come back to that last. Instead, her third ability is Silence. Silence is a superior form of her passive, extending the silencing effect to make all enemies in the area completely unable to react to sounds. On entering the area, enemies become briefly stunned by the ability, holding their heads and bending over as if in distress. Yet a second or so later, they return to normal, unaware anything even happened. This allows you to make your entire team undetectable by sound. More than that though, the silence effect is also an ability silencer. Enemies will be unable to use special abilities within a silent zone, even if the stun didn't affect them like with Xmas. Grapples, Xmas abilities, Acolyte abilities, Oxium Osprey dashes, all of these get entirely disabled. However, passive effects like Nox damage reduction, basic attacks like guns and grenades, boss attacks like in assassinate missions, and nullifier bubbles are all immune to the effects of silence. Still, turning all Xmas threats into merely souped up regular enemies is a big deal. Doubly so when you break their overguard, removing their crowd control immunity and causing them to be immediately stunned by silence. Augmented, enemies in the stun animation will be open to finisher attacks, with a large strength scale bonus applied to all finisher damage. Without this, you'll need some other way to trigger finishers, including just sneaking up behind an unalerted enemy. Silence is available via the helmet system and is one of the very best subsumes on offer. No features are lost or nerfed via helmet, so you get the full effect. For Banshee's fourth ability, Sound Quake, it comes in 2 very different flavours, innate or augmented. The innate form sees Banshee slam the ground and channel a continuous zone of sonic disruption. Enemies within the area will be damaged every second with no line of sight required. They'll also be staggered backwards, even if that's towards Banshee. For the entire time this is channeled, any enemy that is not immune to such crowd control is basically stun locked by the effect. The downside is that Banshee is also locked in. No moving, dodging, shooting or casting anything else while Sound Quake is channeled. As soon as she stops, so do all the effects. Augmented with Resonating Quake, it becomes a different ability really. Instead of locking into position with a channeled and draining ability, Banshee makes a single super powered shockwave. It costs considerably more energy, packing the whole effect into one expanding sphere. The base damage is increased by 1900%, the base range increased by 75%, and the stagger turned into knockdown. The damage and control still ignore all line of sight restrictions, with some weird inconsistency that means 2 identical enemies the same distance away can see one take half the damage of the other. But most standout is that it gains a truly punishing damage fall off over distance. Most forms of AoE damage that decay over distance do so linearly. If you are 50% of the range away from the epicenter of a blast, you will normally experience 50% of the damage decay. AoE primaries and secondaries come with a fall-off stat showing how much damage decay they have out to maximum range, with higher percentages meaning more is lost. Banshee doesn't work like that. Resonating Quake has a 90% maximum damage fall-off, but loses damage on a curve. The vast majority of the loss happens in the immediate vicinity of Banshee, tapering off after that. Instead of the applied damage being base minus 90% times distance over range, the equation is 10% divided by the square root of distance over range. That creates a curve like this. 4% of the distance into the ability, you lose half the damage. With a base 35 meter range, that means the damage is halved in just 1.4 meters, smaller than almost every melee in the game. At 16% range, or 5.6 meters at base, 75% of the damage is lost. Like I said, this curves out so the remaining damage is maintained more steadily. Enemies at 30%, 60% and 90% ability range will typically take 18%, 13% and 11% of the damage. The better way to think about Resonating Quake then is that it does not deal 20 times damage. Instead, it deals about 4 times damage, gradually decaying to about 2 times damage at the range limit. Enemies which get very, very close, however, grant you a panic bonus for letting something get so close to your near defenseless hit points. When viewed through that lens, 2 to 4 times damage for around 8 times the energy cost is quite expensive. You can innately cast Resonating Quake about once per 2 seconds, meaning the damage per sec is increased by 0 to 100% for most circumstances, in exchange for 50 to 75% less damage per energy. As enemies either stagger backwards or get knocked away from you, they'll almost always be pushed away from the center, preventing optimal results. Outside of extremely low level missions or extremely niche group setups, Sound Quake and Resonating Quake are really bad at killing enemies. For controlling them, you're either spending a base 100 energy on a radial knockdown, or effectively stunning yourself to stun enemies, relying on teammates to do the actual cleanup. Which leaves us with Sonar. Sonar is a damage enhancing ability. You send out a sonic wave, highlighting a random spot on every non-boss enemy. Field bosses like acolytes and demolishers can also be marked, though the latter will wash away any sonar marks when their nullification pulse occurs. You and allies that hit the mark spot on an enemy will get a damage bonus scaled from your strength. At base, this is a 5 times damage bonus, multiplicative with basically everything, and scaled directly with your strength. These mark spots do not count as weak spots, however. Mods like Acuity, Scope and Crosshairs all do not interact with these highlights, and they cannot be used to trigger Incarnate charges nor deadhead stacks. Given they're also randomly placed, you may find it less helpful to target them at times, even when the damage bonus exceeds the headshot benefits on many enemies. The highlight landing somewhere other than weak spots does come with an upside though. Many abilities, including Sound Quake, target the center of mass of the enemy, usually the torso. A highlight on that zone will enhance the damage of abilities with defaulted spots. If you've heard of or seen in action some Banshee Sonar highlights in the past, you may have come across the fact that these can stack. Not only do they stack, they can stack multiplicatively with themselves. 2 5 times Sonar highlights affecting the same area will mean a 25 times damage multiplier, rather than the 9 times you'd get with 2 tiers of a 5 times critical hit. But it's not as simple as stacking might imply. Sonar will affect a specific body part on the enemy. This isn't strictly the highlighted areas, as the highlight uses a simple expanding circle pattern regardless of where the graphic would expand to. This means the highlight will bleed into areas it doesn't affect, while also fading to extend fully across an area it does affect. In order to understand the affected area, you need to understand the enemy themselves. Most humanoid enemies can be broken down into 6 parts: head, torso, 2 arms, 2 legs. A highlight on an arm will never give a damage bonus to a torso or head, no matter how the highlight shows. A highlight on both the arm and the head will not stack the bonus neither, as each part is independent. So you might imagine the stacking occurs only when Sonar targets the same spot twice. Wrong. I said humanoids have 6 parts, but in terms of Sonar highlights, they have 11 eligible points. 2 on every body part except the head, where the head only has 1. In order for the sonar to stack, the highlight must be applied to 2 different points on the same part. The chance of landing a double highlight in 2 casts is actually pretty low then. On 11 point enemies, the first highlight will apply to any one of those randomly. For 2 casts of sonar, that's a 10 in 11 chance of not highlighting the head initially, and then a 1 in 11 chance of highlighting the correct second point. In total, an 8.3 chance of a stacked sonar buff. If you cast more sonars, the chance of course grows. With 3 casts it's 22.5%, 4 casts is 39.4%, becoming more likely than not with 55.7% at 5 casts. It takes 9 casts to go over 90%, 13 for 99%, and 17 for 99.9% chance of stacked buffs. Even at that point, you'd still need to identify which body part or parts are bearing stacked buffs, as not all of them will. Still, this stacking has its limits. Even with a glorious 500% strength to reach a 25 times sonar, stacking for 625 times total damage multiplier, which is obscene already by the way, you are limited to the square of your bonus in most circumstances. As much as dealing over 100 times more damage than you would on a critical headshot is great, it's not easy trillions of damage. These rules on stacking only apply to most enemies though. Some enemies, particularly some newer ones, have very different rules. The most ridiculous are the Anatomizer, the Lumbering Fragment, and the Techrot Babao. The Lumbering Fragment has 2 body parts. The very middle, which is considered a headshot, and then everything else. Despite this, it has many sonar points, all connecting those 2 giant limbs, with no distinction even between left and right like on humanoids. This makes it very easy to get stacked multipliers, and those can stack quite highly. The Anatomizer goes even further, having no headshot spot at all, much to the annoyance of Incarnans and snipers, instead featuring 1 body part with 10 points on it. In the extreme of highlighting all 10 points then, which takes on average about 30 sonars, you would get your damage bonus applied 10 times over. Even with no strength mods, that's a 9.8 million times damage bonus. With 200% strength, this climbs to 10 billion. But those 2 are run-of-the-mill enemies, ones you'll defeat handily enough with good weapons, even on Steel Path. The Techrot Babao can prove to be a very resilient unit, especially if it spawns as an Xmas unit. That is, unless a Banshee's in the squad. Babaos, like Lumbering Fragments, have only 2 parts, head and body. However, their head part has at least 5 points on it, 1 on the head itself, and 1 for each of the bulbs on its rear tentacles. This means it can take up to 5 stacks of Banshee's effect on top of the headshot modifier, which is easily enough to turn a thoroughly unimpressive attack into a one-shot. Some units, like Babaos and Anatomizers, don't even display the damage dealt on a lethal blow. They just perish. Even if you don't aim for the head, the Babao also has at least 3 points on each limb, covering foot, knee and hip I guess, as well as at minimum a lower torso point and 2 upper torso points on left and right. All of these points are on a single body part, giving up to 12 stacks from those identified points. For a 200% strength Banshee, we've now reached 1 trillion times maximum damage bonus. Considering the maximum displayed damage is around 500 times lower than the multiplier, safe to say you'll never need it. But if you do choose to stack as many sonars as you can onto a single Babao, you might get a damage log looking like this. That's 2.8 billion trillion damage in just 1 portion of the overall hit, with a total so impractical that the logger gave up resorting to gibberish. The total multiplier achieved would indicate 17 stacks, independent of the head stacks, meaning there must be more sonar points on the Babao than you can even see. For the vast majority of missions and enemies though, this kind of scaling just isn't possible. Grineer, Scaldra, Corpus, you'll have to settle for mere tens or hundreds of times more damage than without sonar. For boss units, you may find sonar completely ineffective, not to mention Banshee's tank. So, let's talk setups. All the setups I'm showing here include stats with Archon Shards. Banshee loves strength shards, but not everything demands it, so listen out for when they matter. I'm using 60% strength and 1 shard for casting speed. That's basically fire rate for casters. With every Banshee setup, you need to know how you intend to live. On this basic approach, we've got a shield regen based survival. The idea is that Banshee can stun and shove enemies often enough to let shields begin to recharge. With this setup, fully depleted shields begin recharging in just 1 second with no ability casting needed. A quarter of a second if not fully depleted. Brief respite on top allows for shields from casting, further solidifying a shield gate tank. Beyond that, we have starting energy from Prime Flow plus Preparation, energy recovery from Arcane Energize, duration from Prime Continuity and Arcane Concentration, a little bit of range with Stretch, and a little bit of strength from Transient Fortitude. Without Archon Shards, this still reaches total armor removal with Sonic Fracture, allowing for a massive damage buff against armored enemies. If you're not fighting armor, or just not intending to use Sonic Fracture, then either Resonance to cascade Sonar casts on groups of enemies, or Savage Silence to enable finisher kills for sneaky takedowns. Rolling Guard is a backup defensive measure, especially if you know toxin damage is incoming. Otherwise, you can use Adaptation to try and make your shield hit points last longer, as 370 flat is nearly nothing, even in moderate level content. But the core remains recharging the shields rather than making each hit point matter. Your playstyle is simple here. Silence to remove major threats, Sonar to buff your damage, and Sonic Boom to knock down and sunder bigger targets. Sound Quake has basically no use here, so that is your subsume for anything of your choice, such as speed from Infested Mobility, combination tank or damage with Eclipse, or Brightbonnet for a combination energy and strength deployable. So long as you have energy, you have power. Using Banshee merely as designed though is perhaps a little too basic. One very effective combination on Banshee is Gloom with her Silence. Gloom provides up to a 95% slowing field around Banshee, and it is precisely as effective as it sounds. Silence, with its stun effect and animation on enemies, enjoys a 20 times longer duration thanks to Gloom at full effect. That's around 40 seconds of an enemy being completely incapacitated in a passive aura. Combine this with Savage Silence, and that's 40 seconds of an open finisher window with 465% extra finisher damage. It is powerfully effective. Your breakpoint to hit is 272% strength. This build's modding gets you to 245% with Precision Intensified buffing Gloom. You can either shore up the rest with Archon Shards, or you can go with Mold Vigor. That arcane asks for just one operator ability for a single 45% strength buff on your next cast. Seeing as you'll never need to turn Gloom off, that'll push you to 290% strength, smashing through the breakpoint for maximum slowing effect. If you do go the Archon Shard route, either swap Precision to Normal Intensify to buff Silence and Sonar, or swap Molt Vigor for another arcane of your choice like Ultimatum to get 1200 armor from your finishers. Overguarded enemies are immune to Silence's stun until the overguard is removed, so you do need to be ready for at least some enemies to shoot back, hence the rolling guard. But then, if you want to get really odd, you can force a health tank onto Banshee. The frame itself will do nothing to help you achieve this, but we have enough external tools to make it happen. Here we can equip Adaptation and Prime Sure-Footed for both damage and knockdown resistance. Arcane Guardian provides armor on being hit, and Arcane Blessing provides a mission-long max health buff on collecting health orbs. Before that stacks up though, a little extra health via Vitality is a welcome thing. Dispensary provides a solid form of both energy recovery and some healing, supported by Equilibrium to do both even more. However, to really use this, you'll want a companion using Synth Fiber and any kind of easy applying attacks to generate health orbs, plus you'll find value in melee fortification for even more armor when getting melee kills. If you apply these effects together, getting the Blessing, Guardian and Adaptation all set up, you reach a peak of 97.75% damage reduction before fortification, and total effective health of 86,330. For comparison, my go-to Lavos build by the same measure is 180,000. Health Tank Banshee is definitely not the most resilient, but she'll Health Tank baseline Steel Path solo well enough, all while applying Sonar and Silence. I have Dispensary over a 1 because of helmet limitations, forcing a helmet ability to occupy the same slot across multiple loadouts on the same specific frame. This matters to one of the upcoming builds, but if you're not in that situation, then dropping Sound Quake is objectively better. For our other 3 builds though, we're going to rely on either having a team or being in low level missions. For build number 4, we want a team. The defensive options have been stripped out and we're now power maxing. With the combination of Molt Vigor, Molt Augmented, Growing Power, my Archon Shards and Brightbonnet, Banshee hits a total of 531.6% strength to apply to Sonar. That's a 26.58 times damage multiplier with every cast, or 706 times when double stacked. Throw in operator abilities or firing Garbacep or Brightbonnet if you somehow need even more power. So long as you have a team to keep you alive, such as a Mesmer Shield Revenant or a well-placed Dante Spectre, you'll be able to reward your team with obscene damage bonuses, especially against the weirdly handled Murmur and Tekrot enemies. There's not a lot of thought that goes into playing this setup. Stick with your team, don't die, and spam Sonar as much as you can afford to while keeping Silence and Brightbonnets up. A slight variant of this build was sent to me by a regular viewer. They and I agree that Banshee setup this way lacks any real defense, so gearing the rest of your loadout to do that for you is very useful. Try a Control Gorgon, a buffing Grimoire, a Stealth Cuirass, and a fallback Contagion Zor for emergency damage. Which finally brings us to a pair of defense builds, Defense Blapper and Dispense Blapper. Defense Blapper is a higher strength, higher damage approach, utilizing Raw and Resonating Quake. On low-level defense missions in particular, this will slam out lethal waves of damage ideal for taking down waves of foes. While it has both Equilibrium and Arcane Energize to restore energy, and Steadfast to slow the spend of energy, there will come a limit if not supported by allies or good fortune. So if you want more sustain, you need the reason my Dispensary subsume is on Banshee's 1. The Dispense Blapper is focused far less on strength, more so on range to cover a larger field, and Dispensary to keep paying the cost forever. This one benefits hugely from Archon Shards as the base strength is only 95% and 185% on Sound Quake. Having the extra power makes a serious difference at the top end. For both Blappers, you can either use Xeneric Focus School for the strength and energy regen buffs, or you can use Madurai for casting speed and higher strength buffs. With you as the only Banshee, these setups will only handle basic defense missions. It'll impress people farming Affinity and Saturn's Helene, but will do nothing to stop Acolytes and any other Steel Path unit. However, if you are joined by a second Banshee, one spamming Sonar with high strength, then you can combine the large, sightless AoE with large, sightless damage buffs and even clear Steel Path defense missions. I can't say it'll be the most engaging method, spamming a couple abilities on the spot while the chorus of death echoes around you, but it can work. Banshee is a very focused frame with some old school mechanics. She's got precious little survival, expecting either a team or serious investment into defenses. But when you do put in the work, she carries some obscene damage buffs and unique controlling measures. She's not easy to play if you don't know how to keep her running, but once you get the hang of it, she'll turn anything into a lethal powerhouse. All of these builds and some behind the scenes math can be found on my Patreon, so check that out to join others in the community who support this channel. And as always, block sounds, quake grounds, and fight well, Tenno.